Good morning. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please rise for the invocation. O God, we pray to administer that which is just in all educational policies, being ever mindful of your guidance, stir us to action with love, wisdom, and understanding. The pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 2.03, approval of the minutes of the Board of Education. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Second. All those in favor? Motion passes 7-0-0. Item 2.04, establish agenda order, and the agenda stands as published. 2.05, recognitions. Kathy Lane.
Good morning. I'm Kathy Lane, Executive Director of Alternative Education, and I have the pleasure of introducing this morning's board recognition. Before I begin, I would like to ask members of the board and Dr. Arlato to come forward, please. Good morning. Members of the board and Dr. Arlato, the Phoenix Academy was envisioned as a dynamic, community-oriented educational setting designed to serve as a model for multi-agency collaboration. Its multidisciplinary approach is strengthened by meaningful collaboration among Anne Arundel County Public Schools and its sister child-serving agencies and community partners who share office space in the interagency partner suite located at the Phoenix Academy. The Departments of Juvenile Justice, Mental Health, the faith-based community, local nonprofits, and the Partnership for Children, Youth, and Families, together with the Phoenix staff, support the educational and social-emotional development of the students we serve in numerous and diverse ways. These partnerships enhance learning, strengthen relationships, and provide opportunities for our students to access vital resources and benefit from increased communication and collaboration among the agencies designed to support them. As a result, our students are actively mentored by members of the community who help them to see their potential and support them in attaining their goals. From psychiatric and therapeutic mental health services offered in the school setting by the Children's Guild that helps to normalize mental health services, to crisis stabilization services provided by the Mental Health Agency's core service agency, who are our eyes and ears at home and after school and during the summer, when our students need continued service. They collaborate with staff, county agencies, conduct trainings, and develop stabilization plans for some of our most vulnerable students. Volunteers through Seeds for Success have provided child care to support a teen parent who needed to complete bridge projects to meet graduation requirements. Our partners go to incredible lengths to support our students and families. The result is increased time in the classroom, increased support for parents and families, and most importantly, increased academic achievement on the part of our students. Similarly, the faith-based community has been a key part of the Phoenix team. Pastor Cheryl Menendez and her staff have donated books to our media center, provided merchandise and wrapped gifts at our PBS Holiday Bazaar, taken female students to get dresses and accessories for the prom, and provided minority male role models to mentor our young men. Further, the Partnership for Children, Youth, and Families offer our students opportunities to participate in community conferences, which allow parties to address behaviors that have caused harm, and provides a forum for the offenders and victims and everyone involved to repair the damages caused by an incident and minimize further harm. They also provide invaluable family navigation services for our families who are overwhelmed with multiple needs. Navigation services help families figure out the maze of community agencies and resources and introduce them to resources they didn't even know exist, from housing to medical and dental care to community activities for their children. Additionally, probation officers from the Department of Juvenile Services have been a great resource to the Phoenix Academy staff and our students. Their regular presence and helps us to maintain constant communication to support our students and encourage them to do the right thing both inside and outside of school. According to John Thompson, principal at the Phoenix Academy, he states, "We have come to appreciate that not all barriers to our students' academic success are school-related. By leveraging the resources and support of our community partners, we've been able to eliminate many of the unique and challenging barriers impeding our students' success as we work together to elevate all students at the Phoenix Academy. Our partners believe in our kids, and they see hope in them, and are willing to cultivate it with boots on the ground and hands-on support. All of these things said lift our students up. They help us build bridges, not walls. And in this case, the bridges are to academic and social-emotional success. As I call their names, they come forward. Please join me in thanking these incredible partners for all they do for our students. The Partnership for Children, Youth, and Families, the Department of Juvenile Services, the Department of Mental Health Core Service Agency, Seeds for Success, Restoration Community Development Corporation, and the Children's Guild. Also joining us today are Mr. John Thompson, Principal, and Ms. Merlene Clark, Assistant Principal of the Phoenix Academy.
Do you want us to go up the top? Do you want us to go back?
Okay, everybody, look this way. We're going to take 3 shots. Make sure we do that.
The next item is item 2.06, Educator of the Month, Mrs. Burge.
Thank you, Ms. Korblack. Today, we recognize a teacher in our school system who is a fitness guru in every sense of the word. She believes in a healthy school environment and promotes physical activity in school to keep students and staff on the move and engaged in activities in support of fitness. Lauren Tozo, physical education teacher at Brooklyn Park Middle School, does more than teach PE to my son and so many other students. She fosters self-esteem in her Girls on the Track Club, helping her female students develop socially, emotionally, and physically through character education lessons and running. The program culminates in a 5K run. She also started a staff wellness initiative, hosting her Sergeant Samuel's exercise program, volunteering her time planning the hour-long fitness sessions. She also volunteers her time and expertise if anyone needs individual support or help at meeting their fitness personal goals. Mrs. Tuozo is truly a caring individual that avoids judgment based on appearances. She's always encouraging towards students and staff regarding fitness and overall well-being, regardless of body composition, fitness ability, age, gender, and stamina. Mrs. Tozo pushes students and staff to perform their very best, and it is the personal best for each individual that counts. My son was privileged to have you as a teacher last semester and enjoyed going to your class nearly every day, except for the human sexuality days. As many of the people in this room already know, we've discussed that before. Lauren supports Brooklyn Park's vision and school improvement plan without hesitation. Each and every day, she demonstrates her belief that all children are capable of success, no exceptions. She takes an active leadership role in school committees, and her work ethic is commendable. During instruction, she breaks down concepts and scaffolds instruction so that students can build stamina, participate in challenging drills, while she tailors motivational support to each student. As a lifelong learner, she truly supports her profession. Mrs. Tozo volunteers annually to organize 2 well-received events, supporting community involvement and parental participation at her school, with muffins for moms and donuts for dads. Serving as chairperson for these events, students and parents are entertained and excited to participate. She interacts with her school community in a way that is positive, professional, encouraging, and enthusiastic. Lauren Tozo, your dynamic instructional activities support your students learning lifelong physical activity and wellness. You mentor your students on a daily basis, and you are a true model of respect for self, students, and colleagues. We also want to congratulate you because when this was originally written, you were Lauren Samuels. And since then, so when your colleagues nominated you, you weren't married. So congratulations on now being Mrs. Tozo. And on behalf of the Board of Education and the entire Brooklyn Park Middle School family, we are pleased to honor you as Educator of the Month for February 2015. Will you please join me up front? So, how did Ms. Kennard lie to you?
She told me that I was going to be speaking with a bunch of physical educators about Common Core and how we're implementing Common Core into phys ed and health.
Okay.
So
You all had me a little worried because I saw you walk in after the meeting had started. I was looking around and was starting to get a little nervous because I knew we were next on the agenda. And oh no, they're not here yet. I was very relieved when you got here. Here is a certificate with your maiden name on it, of course, and a bell with your maiden name on it.
Thank you.
Congratulations. And who came here to support you today?
My husband and my mother-in-law, Nora, my husband, Vinny, who's also a teacher in the county, Maureen Grizio, our health coordinator, my principal, Tamisha Kennard, and my former assistant principal, Jennifer Carina, who's now principal at a different school.
Who we miss very much.
Yes.
Well, thank you for everything that you do, and CJ did love having you as a teacher. He said you're a wonderful teacher. So
Thank you.
Thank you very much for all
Thank
that
you
you
so
do
much.
for all of our kids. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Congratulations.
And just a quick note, we're going to be taking pictures of Educator, Employee, and Volunteer of the Month right after the CAC report at a break, so please stay around till then. Item 2.07 is Employee of the Month, Ms. Chaudhry.
The endorsers of our Employee of the Month had this to say: how many times have you wished you could clone a certain person? That person is the type to always do the right thing and one who can be relied upon consistently. Well, Shadyside Elementary School is lucky to have such a person. Her name is Karen Russick, and she is a full-time teacher's assistant for 4 kindergarten teachers. We all know and love Mrs. Russick because she is one of those special people you know you can rely on. Karen Russick has been an amazing asset to Shadyside for 8 years. Each and every school day, she arrives on time, smiling and ready to start her day immediately. She greets students at arrival time, helps them put their belongings away, and reminds them of their jobs. 4 kindergarten classrooms can create a lot of traffic, and Karen manages the activity most efficiently, without any ruffled feathers. In addition to helping teachers prepare for their day, she preps for special lessons such as experiments, cooking or craft lessons, all the while keeping the schedules running on time. Miss Russick is trained in the Reading Incentive Program and works with several intervention groups daily, helping students to develop sight words and decoding skills. Her small group of children continue to show growth and to practice these students' need for success. She keeps teachers apprised of those students who are struggling as well as those who are excelling. The staff at Shadyside knows that Karen can be counted on for all sorts of assistance. If she is not servicing the laminator or assisting the guidance counselor with her good behavior reward box, she can be seen prepping bulletin boards, making copies of lessons, or subbing a class where the teacher may be in a meeting. She also manages a large population of car riders, always keeping the office aware of late arrivals of miscommunications. Miss Russick takes her responsibility very seriously. Her quiet and calm demeanor creates a calming effect on busy teachers and busy students. Living in the community, she knows many students personally and makes an effort to meet new students as well. She has a background knowledge of students but continues to have a high degree of professionalism. She shares important, necessary information without breaking confidentiality. Karen Russick, you're a blessing at Shadyside. You are always willing to help out wherever and whenever. You're a strong supporter of the school's PTA, and everyone in the Shadyside community holds you in a high regard. And although the Board of Education does not have the power to clone you, we do have the honor of recognizing you Employee of the Month for February 2015. Congratulations, and please join me up front. Congratulations. So we have a bell with your name on it and a certificate of appreciation for everything you do. And so how did they lie to you to get you here today?
Mr. Casey, my principal, is here just trying to get another TA for kindergarten. And my husband is here also.
So someone to help you out, supposedly. So who else is here with you?
Just my husband,
Just
and,
your husband.
and Mr. Casey, my principal.
Well, congratulations
Thank you.
once again.
Thank you so much.
Item 2.08, Volunteer of the Month, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Madam President. Many retired Anne Arundel County teachers and staff return to ACPS schools to bring their deep knowledge and honed skills to benefit our students. Most are temporary retired rehires, while others simply volunteer their time and talents. Our Volunteer of the Month is the epitome of one such lifelong teacher. Today, the Board of Education is pleased to honor Mr. Don Patterson. Since December 2011, Don has faithfully volunteered every Monday in the science and math classes at Annapolis Middle School. As a retired science teacher and special educator, Don is an incredible resource who is instrumental in supporting students' learning by reteaching concepts to struggling learners or engaging advanced learners in extension activities. Teachers value Don's content knowledge, instructional expertise, and willingness to help wherever is needed. Through his easy, gentle manner, Don builds trusting, respect-filled relationships with both students and adults. His kind demeanor calms students, allowing them to be more receptive to challenging new concepts. He lives and breathes the Kids at Hope philosophy that all children are capable of success, no exceptions. Generosity is one of Don's many attributes. He has supplemented classroom libraries and instruction with donated books and supplies, both new and from his own collection. Don enjoys sharing his wealth of experiences both in and beyond the classroom, especially when it comes to digging and studying fossils. His passion and depth of knowledge are apparent in the Maryland Fossil Beach activity he creates each year for the 8th grade classes. To prepare, Don travels to southern Maryland to collect boxes of fossils representing different ancient species. The students dig through the beach of fossils. They clean and identify them, and then Don invites the students to keep their finds. When he can, Don also volunteers to chaperone field trips, serve as a science fair judge, and often assists teachers with planning for and setting up lab activities. Beth Foster, Annapolis Middle School Science Department Chair, invites Mr. Patterson's gracious spirit inspires others to kindness and respect for each other. His passion for science fosters a desire to never stop learning. The impact Mr. Patterson has on both students and teachers is immeasurable. Mr. Don Patterson, would you please come forward? With great appreciation, I would like to present this Volunteer of the Month certificate and bell to you. I'll have to say this is actually my ping pong partner. And he's a good ping pong player.
Opponent, you should say.
But congratulations to you. Thank you so much for what you do. There's a certificate and a bell that we present to you, and then I think we have to ask you, how did we get you here today?
Well, I was under the false impression that Beth Foster was going to be recognized.
That is good.
I was a little suspicious. I was wondering, why are they doing this now that she's no longer at the middle school? But I figured, well, there was some justification for it. But,
and who all came?
my wife is here, Patty, and Shauna Saito from Annapolis Middle, Mr. Lewis there.
And Patty used to be my former library at the United States Naval Academy. So thank you both for what you do, and congratulations to you.
Good. So have many courses.
Our next item is 2.09, School and Community Highlights. Ms. Ritchie.
Yesterday, with Dr. Arlotto and the county executive, we had a chance to go visit 3 of the schools in the North County who are implementing the EEE program. And I just have to say how blown away I was and how wonderful they have embraced this new pilot program. Linthicum, which is of course our national blue ribbon school, they're just off the chart up there. I mean, they're excited, they're enthusiastic, the kids are engaged. To go into the classrooms and to see what's going on is just unbelievable. North Glen, we had an opportunity to sit down with some of the teachers while they were doing some of the work and in terms of their collaboration and working to build their lessons. And one of the, I think, unintended consequences of things like this is there were 2 teachers there, and it was a whole team. There was a special educator, there was the reading resource teacher, there was a math resource teacher, and then of course the two first grade teachers. And so my question to the 2 first grade teachers was, what do you get out of this? I mean, really, is it? One was a brand new teacher, and she said, you know, this is my first year teaching, and how great is this? And the 4th year teachers was the same, was that, you know, she was able to expand on her ideas. There wasn't anything wrong. They were able to collaborate. And I especially thought about the first year teacher in a program like this. You know, we have a Right Start advisors and things, but they're spread thin. And here in this opportunity, these first year teachers, when we talk about recruitment and retention, they have the ability to really feel a part of that school and feel supported and feel, you know, teaching is almost like a silo thing. You go into your classroom, you close your door, and you know, they give you a certificate at the end, you pass your praxis, and they say, here you go, and you're like, oh my God. So I thought that was an invaluable thing. And then we also got to stop up at Park, and Park's program is STEM they're doing, and the kids were building catapults out of tongue depressors. Well, no, not tongue depressors, the popsicle sticks and rubber bands and knocking things out. Unbelievable. These kids were so engaged, and they all worked, and they were having a great time. But really who blew me away in this program was Bill Forster, who is their STEM coordinator. Oh my God. He is just doing fabulous things. And he's also doing things on Saturdays, and he's doing things in the evening. They had an event, a STEMtastic event that he coordinated. The first year they did it, they had about 17 students and their families show up. This year they did it, they had over 48 students and their families show up. Kids are engaged. He's going to be doing the Legos robotics competition. I think he said next Saturday or Saturday coming up and something like that. It's just unbelievable. And for anybody who doesn't think that STEM, or that kids thinks that education looks like it did 30 years ago, really needs to make an appointment to go into some of our schools and see what's going on, because let me tell you what, it will blow you away. And I just want to thank you all for the opportunity to be able to have gone up to them and to see the great things that were going on in our schools, and the great way that these kids were engaged. It's just unbelievable.
Mrs. Birch.
I had the opportunity to represent our board last Thursday at the MABE Legislative Luncheon in Annapolis. After we heard about an update about various legislation, and we heard about the impact of state budget cuts on both our county as well as other counties, we had the opportunity to hear from a variety of legislators from around the state about their commitment to public education, which was refreshing to hear, and how they are hoping to work with what has been given to them by the governor with the budget to hopefully make some changes to improve our situation. As most of you probably have heard, there's been cuts of $9.9 million to what Anne Arundel County was scheduled to get in state money from the formulas. So cuts to formulas of $9.9 million, which puts us in a little bit of a precarious situation. So, you know, there's been a lot of commitment from legislators to work with the governor to see how we could perhaps remedy that situation so that things won't be quite so dire for Anne Arundel County and other states, or, I mean, other counties around the state. So just wanted to give an update on that. Thank you.
Ms. Chaudhry.
I just wanted to bring to attention the wonderful work that was done by Anthony Alston and his department. I don't know if many of you guys know this, but January is the official reading month for the state of Maryland, and Anthony and his department, they had been gearing towards this month this past year, trying to get as many high schoolers and elementary schoolers to participate, and what they wanted to do was getting the high schoolers to go out and read to the elementary schoolers. And I know that you guys are very successful because I saw all the tweets on the AACPS homepage, and I just wanted to say congratulations and thank you for doing that. Another thing I wanted to kind of highlight was on the 15th of January, we had the National Board Certified Teachers Pinning Ceremony, and I was very privileged to go to that and to represent the board at that event. And I just wanted to congratulate those teachers once again, because honestly, they truly do deserve it. The process that they go through at the end, when you were handing out the pins, you could see the sigh of relief, and it was just a really nice event. I just wanted to congratulate them again, and I wanted to thank Richard for inviting us to the TAC Legislative Breakfast, which was on the 10th. Again, thank you for that. And the last one goes out to South River High School swim team. We broke a couple of records at their last meet, so congratulations, South River.
Mr. Webb.
Thank you. Ms. Ritchie, I visited two schools yesterday with you and the superintendent, Linthicum and North Glen. In one of those schools, they were building bridges with popsicle sticks. I think it was a second grade class. I had a second grader explain to me the load-bearing capacity of suspension bridges using popsicle sticks. I thought that was pretty amazing. That's in a project-based learning environment. It's different from the regimentation we typically see, and I hope that we'll have the funding to continue that in more of our elementary schools. The children are very enthusiastic, the teachers are very enthusiastic, and the results are phenomenal. Thank you.
I just wanted to also add, since we didn't have our meeting on the 21st, that some of the board had a chance to celebrate Martin Luther King at a dinner and again at a breakfast over that holiday weekend. And on Saturday night, some of us had a chance to celebrate the arts at the Anne Arundel Arts Council annual event that was themed about Cuba. And on Monday, Dr. Arlato and I had a chance to visit Eastport and Georgetown East Elementary School, as I'm kind of making the rounds of the schools that are up for redistricting. So it was good to get inside and see the buildings and see the challenges there. Item 2.10, the CAC report.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. I'm Karma O'Neill with the CAC. The CAC continues to work on community outreach. Our equity committee has been working with the Office of Equity and is ready to report their progress at our March meeting. They would have reported on Monday, but we had such a great discussion from Dr. Arlato about some changes that they're proposing in the recognition that we kind of went over our time frame. Our communications committee has also been researching opportunities to reach a larger percentage of our population, and they have come up with some really great ideas that were going to be announced soon. We met on Monday, and like I said, we received a great report from Dr. Arlato, and we are tasked with taking that out to our clusters, the proposed change in the student recognition program, and getting feedback, and we hope to have feedback to you in the next month. We also are asking our clusters to voice their support to the County Council after speaking with Mr. Webb about the importance of the teacher step pay raises and maintaining those teachers that we're hiring, keeping them on for longer than the 1 or 2 years of training and then letting them go off. So we are dedicated to go out to our clusters and get them to all go to those county council forums. So I appreciate that. That's all. We have our next meeting in March, and thank you very much too for Kevin for coming.
Thank you. We're going to take a break now for pictures, and we'll be back. Okay. Our next item on the agenda is item 2.11, and this is a special presentation on heroin use 2014 in Anne Arundel County. Dr. Pamela Brown.
Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here this morning on behalf of County Executive Steve Shue and the Heroin Task Force, and I'd also like to recognise Superintendent Arlotto. It's so heartwarming, Superintendent, that you're actually an active member of the team and you've come to the table, so thank you for that. As you all know, we are in the middle of a real crisis in our county related to heroin. Our county executive has declared an emergency, and I'm just going to run through some facts and figures with you this morning that explains a little bit about why we believe it's such an emergency. So here's some quick national data. I won't read them all. I think one of the important things is how much drug abuse and addiction is costing us. You see the sum is $534 billion nationally. And then if we move down to the heroin issues, 75% of people who try heroin once will use the drug again. That's how addictive it is. We also know that at least 75% of participants had mental health disorders who were participating in heroin. We all know that there's a link between prescription pills and heroin, so many of our users first started with Vicodin and OxyContin. Many of them are very legitimate painkillers. There have been several incidents of sports people starting in this place quite legitimately and then moving on to heroin because it gets very, very expensive, because the pills run out, because they're getting harder and harder to get, and as we'll see later, because heroin is a much cheaper alternative. Heroin users, their profile has changed a lot. I think in the 70s and 80s, we used to think of heroin and think of like really poor communities with desperate, run-down places. That's just not the case anymore. Heroin users now are young, white suburbanites. 90% of heroin users are white men and women. The average age is 23. And 75% in the most recent survey said that they started with prescription opioids like OxyContin. They didn't start from the usual paths. What do we know about youth, which I know is very important to the school board? The initiations to heroin have increased by 80% in the last 12 years. We know that the numbers are going up and up in terms of those who initiate for the first time. And we see again the same figures. The majority are white, 76%. Latinos now running at 16%. African Americans are at a low 2%. What do we know about our state? Well, we know it's growing. We know that the deaths are going up by an enormous amount every year. And again, we know that our victims are majority white. And here's our county. Well, we all should know now that our heroin overdoses are at a rate of more than one a day. These are all figures now, but 172 heroin overdoses by May of this year, and that's why our police are now carrying Narcan. We've seen that they've almost tripled this year. City Police, Annapolis City Police, saw 28 overdoses within city limits in this year, 5 in one day in April. So what's going on? Well, we know it's going up statewide. We know that prescription opioids are a lot harder to get hold of. We know it's cheap. It's $10. Hit of heroin is $10. It's way more available, and we can see those figures. And here's probably the most scary and important thing as we talk about this. It's purer, but it's laced with more other heavy substances like fentanyl. So it's a lot more addictive. As though it wasn't bad enough, it's a lot more addictive. And it's very, very easy to use. Most people now sniff heroin. So our old imaginations running of, they're like tying the rubber band round, and that's not what's happening. It's happening in our mall bathrooms. It's happening in parking lots. It's happening everywhere. People are passing it and sniffing it. What's the geography? And by the way, the two photographs are real. That's a real heroin user before and as heroin grasped her, and you can see the sort of ravages that are done on her face. We know that it's a significant problem in Mayo and Parole and Edgewater. We know that the Southern District is particularly badly hit, and we believe that that's because of the I-95 corridor. Now, when I did this presentation, we only had one methadone clinic, and that was in the north. I'm actually really delighted to say our county executive's been with us a month now, and we're already planning a methadone clinic in South County. So I'm just extremely impressed and delighted to be able to tell you that. One of the other issues for us, of course, in this county is transportation. So many of the problems are to do with how people get to treatment, and that's for all issues related to substance abuse. So what can we do? Well, we know that we need leadership at the highest level, and fortunately, we've now got it. So I think that County Executive Shue and Superintendent Arlotto could have done nothing more important than making this such a highlighted issue for our community. We know prevention's far more effective than cure, and really that's where you come in, school board members, because we need to be getting to our young people while they're still young and in school, while they're still going to teen parties. I talked to some of the people at Pathways, who's one of our good substance abuse providers in the county, and the person I was talking to said that one of the biggest issues for young people is they go to teen parties, they start taking cannabis, it moves on to those, what they call bag parties, where they all throw prescription drugs. It's not a far throw then to the next stage and the next stage. So we really, really need to be dealing with our young people, really as young as we can get them. And you're going to be hearing a lot more about that as the task force moves to create a real education campaign, not just for the community, but for our schools. And the good news is we know from other states and nationally that public education campaigns are successful. There's a lot of research that tells us if you shine a light, if you keep making a noise, if you let parents know what the early signs are, if you talk to children constantly, then the heroin use will go down. And just one last slide, and you'll all get a copy of this. Wisconsin's doing some great work on this. They started in 2013. They have an excellent public relations campaign that's worth looking at. It's called the Fly Effect. I'm hoping that here in Anne Arundel County we'll do something similar, and we'll also attach to what's happening at the state level with our new governor, Governor Hogan. So thank you very much, everybody, and we'll be back to keep you informed about what the task force is doing. Thank you.
Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, ma'am. I actually appreciate both the superintendent and you all for tackling this issue. I live down on Sands Road in South County.
Okay.
There's an extreme challenge down in South County relative to heroin. I've read in the paper today, Mr. Mosier had sent out about methadone clinics, and there was some concerns up in Mr. Kipke's area with establishing one. You mentioned one in South County. Are you talking about the rural part of South County, or what I really mean by that is some folks classify South County as south of the South Rivers. South County area plan really classifies South County as south of 214. Are we really talking about a methadone clinic south of 214, or are we talking about establishing one somewhere in the Edgewater area?
So that discussion is happening with the health department, but we'll get back with you, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Mrs. Birch.
On that same note, I've been reading a lot of the public opposition to the methadone clinics, and I'm wondering what sort of efforts you're making with the public to let them know about what the clinics really are, and not just the public, but perhaps also some of our elected officials who don't understand that it's not a junkie warehouse, mm-hmm. which seems to be what they think it is. Because I'm concerned, we have this problem and we need to deal with it. And, what I read is that everyone thinks, well, all the clinics should be on Ritchie Highway. And that's not an answer, because that's not where the people who need the clinics are located, and not everyone can get to Ritchie Highway. Mm-hmm. So I'm just wondering what steps you're making to educate both the public and our elected officials that we're not going to solve our problem unless there's treatment for people, and the treatment needs to be where the people are.
Absolutely. So I think one of the important things that is happening in the county, and I really believe this, is that those sorts of messages come best from community members themselves. So there are 4 established substance abuse coalitions in the county now, one in South County, one in West, one in North, and we've got one on the Broadneck Peninsula. And we're really starting to talk a lot to them about they have been specifically substance abuse coalitions, and we have looked a lot at the use of alcohol in young people and the use of pot in young people. We're really beginning to talk to them now about this emergency and how they can become spokespeople, both to their own communities and to their officials, about how important and how serious this is. And I honestly think that message comes best when it comes from the people who actually do the voting. And so I think the more we do of that, the better. And I think the other message is, this is everybody's child. This isn't someone else's child. Everyone who has a teenager, everyone who has a young child needs to understand that this is an easy path. There is no difficulty here. It's an easy path for any young person. As you all know, young people struggle with a whole variety of issues as they move through, no matter whether they come from comfortable families, struggling families. Children and adolescents all struggle, and they have really, really bad risk-taking behaviours because, as we know now, we know that executive function hasn't developed particularly well, at least until they're about 24. So I think the more that we all accept that it's all of our issues, it's not just the addicts issue or the parent of the addicts issue or Superintendent Arlotto's issue or County Executive Shu's issue, although they can all show leadership. It is the issue for our community that we all have to grasp now, and we all need to use our own power and our own feet and our own voices to talk about it and convince everyone. Now, I personally believe that prevention is, without doubt, the most important thing. And when we're talking about methadone, we're at the back end of the problem. But we are there. We already have thousands of addicts in this county, and what we do know is methadone is one of the few ways to be helpful. So that's really where I am. Prevention. We've got to treat those who have already got tied up in the knot, and really community outreach and community activity is going to be so important.
Mrs. Ritchie.
As somebody who's going to live up the street from where the methadone clinic is going to be, and as a healthcare professional, I understand the importance of having to do that. And having worked with drug addicts before, it's not an easy task, and it's not easy when it's in your community. But whether they put it in Pasadena, whether they put it in Ritchie Highway, where it's going to go, people in those areas are going to be upset. So
absolutely,
the thing that you did having to do with where the cases in the South County where you see the biggest problem, that's probably going to have to be broken down for all of them, because people in Pasadena can pretend that there's not a problem, but there is.
Absolutely.
And when you talk about the parties and stuff, the school system can do all the education you want, but as parents, if we allow that to occur in our house, and if we say things like, well, at least they're in a home about people they know, well, guess what? That doesn't make it right. It's just like teen drinking or anything like that. You know, I mean, we have to stand up to that and say we're not allowing that. And so it's going to be imperative that this you're absolutely right. It's not one person's issue. It's a community issue. And I think that it would be very helpful if you had breakdown on a lot of the communities, because the fact is, no matter where it goes, there's going to be somebody who's going to say, not in my community. And, you know, and I can understand that. There's fear associated with it. There's crime associated with it. You know, there's all those things that sometimes prove out, sometimes don't. But I also understand that the clinic they're proposing for the Pasadena area is a private clinic. It's not run by the county. It's not a state agency. So, you know, it may be the appropriate place. It may not be the most appropriate place. But.
And you're right, Ms. Ritchie, and thank you for pointing out that we have a community norm in our community about alcohol and parties, and we constantly reach out to parents to try to explain how that's just the start of a whole set of issues for our young people. And in terms of where heroin is being used, it is all over our county. Make no mistake. Savannah Park, Pasadena, Brook, it doesn't matter which place you mention. Heroin has got its claws in to every aspect of our community, and you better believe it. So we're doing everything we can to get the right facts and figures to show that, to raise the alarm, and to have everybody be responsive.
Mrs. Nally.
A long time ago, I'm not going to say how long, when I was teaching in this county, it was a national program called DARE. It was a drug education program. And as a teacher, I learned a lot. It was a combination. And I'm going way back, but the police would come in, and there were lessons, and they came in and spoke with the students. They had actually it was a whole program, and I know it went in out of popularity because they said it didn't make a difference, and I was not in favor of it going out then. As a teacher, I saw where it did make a difference, right with our youngest kids, and the program was effective, I felt. But anyway, it's not. So something like that, upgraded and made more, would be so effective with our elementary. And as you're saying, this is on the front end, where we're actually, it worked with smoking. I mean, we all have had situations where our children have said, or grandchildren have said, "Oh, yuck, smoking." We've learned that in school. So we do have an impact on kids in the early years, and I just would like to see something similar. DARE was a national program, and I think it was funded somewhat nationally, but I would like something like that, where we actually have the opportunity to get to all the students on a systematic basis, as we did with DARE, coupled with help from our law enforcement people, because they bring an added impact. When the teacher's just giving the lessons, that's not, but when the police officer comes in and speaks about the impact of the things that you're talking about and there were activities, it was a good program, and I think that would be one effort to do something similar.
I remember the DARE program. We used to have it in Florida.
You're too young
yes,
to remember.
No, I do remember the DARE program. So I think one of the important things about the task force is that the chief of police for the county and the city and the mayor are all on the task force. And one of the things that we're talking about in separate subcommittees is how to work with the school system and what kinds of programs that we can introduce. There are lots of evidence-based programs now, and I think you're absolutely right. Those that have a lot of activities, have police officers, they're always very beguiling to kids, and it's certainly a way that we can move forward. So we're pursuing grants, and we have a separate piece that's looking at how we can re-engage those sorts of programs in the school system.
Thank you.
Dr. Arlato.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Thank you for your passion and your leadership and for educating me in the last couple of months. I also want to recognize Dr. Gail Cicero, who is going to be serving with me on the task force and on the subcommittee, the education subcommittee. So thank you for your work on that. As I've said publicly already, we're very committed to being part of the solution. And so we're glad to be at the table. It's unfortunate that we're at the table and that we have to do this, but we're glad that we can be part of the solution, and we're committed to prevention through education. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Jackson.
I'll be quick. I want to reiterate something that Ms. Nally kind of talked about with DARE. I grew up and DARE was very much a part in Tennessee of my education. I will tell you, as part of Police Chief Altamori's citizen-wide advisory committee, I'm one of the members that's on there, and we've had some conversation with respect to DARE and other programs. It may not be exactly DARE, but maybe something else that helps to kind of continue with with something that's in alignment with what you have kind of said, focusing on this issue and other issues relative to drugs and alcohol.
That's great.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Brown, I have a couple questions. Is there a connection between heroin use and our homeless population or HIV infections in this county? I know it is in many cities, but...
There's certainly a connection between heroin use in the old way through needles and HIV. We do know that. I don't know what the figures are for the county. And the homeless population, yes. I mean, one of the things that happens when you get addicted to heroin is that you will try and find it wherever you can. You fall further and further down in economically and in every other way. There's an awful lot of prostitution. There's an awful lot of theft involved with heroin use because, unfortunately, the high becomes more potent and important than anything else. So I don't know that we have figures on that in the county, but I would bet that there's a real connection among some of our homeless, especially young people, and a heroin addiction. And our superintendent of our jail system said just recently, and I actually had to ask him to repeat it, that 81% of his population who were being admitted had also acknowledged that they'd had heroin use in the last week. And I was staggered. I had to say, Terry, did I hear you? 81%. So yes, you know, and it, so much of the crime is situational crime. And obviously the homelessness is because all of the resources become funneled into the habit. And so, and then the homeless life begins, and the prostitution begins, and all the other things.
My other question kind of ties in with the homeless population. Have we looked or considered the program called Street Soccer USA at all? Montgomery County and DC has it as a way to encourage treatment and, you know, kind of keeping them off the streets and off of heroin through soccer.
It sounds great. I'm not familiar with that one, but now I'm going to go look it up.
Okay.
My
students, my college students, and I have worked with the group in the area. So if you need information, I'll be happy to share it.
That's fabulous. And I should just give a plug for my own little agency. So at the basketball games in middle school, we do Students Against Substance Abuse, and we do, you know, anti-heroin messages at all of those. But yeah, any new program I'm always interested in, so I'll be looking for that one.
Okay. Thanks, Ms. Chaudhry.
I was just going to say, I'm not familiar with the DARE program, but I know that's something that we... Yeah. So, but something that I am familiar with right now is I don't know if any of you guys have seen this, but on TV they have these smoking commercials, and they are super scary. They show how smoking controls your life, and I don't know if that's something you want to do, because I know those have a huge impact. And I think the National Health Association is the people who are behind those commercials, but that's a really good idea. And definitely the ad campaign from Wisconsin, that's good too, because I don't think a lot of young people know the consequences. I think it's downplayed whenever they go to parties or with their friends. It's downplayed what the consequences are. They're like, oh, it's not a big deal, so it's okay if I do it once. But I think we kind of just have to scare them into it so they don't do it.
I think you're right. I think this is a case where we do have to scare them. I agree.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
The next portion of our agenda is the public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on an item not on today's agenda may offer testimony during the public comment portion of the meeting. Speakers will be allotted 3 minutes each. The board asks that comments remain civil and appropriate for the various audiences that may be watching or viewing the meeting. Student-specific and personnel matters are confidential and cannot be discussed in this forum. This time is intended for speakers to voice their opinion and not necessarily as a question and answer period. Speakers may pose questions, but the answers will be counted toward the 3-minute allotment. For the record, please give your name before speaking. Handouts should be given to the board assistant. I have 3 completed cards right now. Tom Boynton on redistricting, and Lisa Miller and Lisa Van Buskirk on school start times.
You guys want to go first? Good morning again. I'm Tom Boynton, parent from Tyler Heights, for my monthly championing of Tyler Heights and the hope that we do something next year for the school. My daughter, Etta, 2nd grade, got straight A's yesterday. We're very happy. She loves the school. We love the school. But the thing that, we worry about is her enthusiasm next year when she has to go into one of the portables, because we hear stories from other kids who go to the portables every day. And if it's a cold, rainy day in the spring, they walk in and out of the portable 3 times. By the time they get back in the portable the 3rd time, they're cold and wet for the rest of the day, So I just worry that, she's going to start slipping her enthusiasm. She's a very enthusiastic person. I just worry about her enthusiasm if we don't get something done next year. And part of the reason I worry about it is, I live on Forest Hills Avenue, and there's no sidewalks. And all the kids who have matriculated from Tyler Heights, they go to the middle school. Well, they walk down Forest Hills Avenue, and there's no sidewalks. And a couple years ago, I had the city manager at the time, my alderman out there. We looked at the road, had them out there while the kids were walking by, and city manager and my alderman were like, well, we got to do something about this now. The mayor changed, poof, all gone. And I kind of worry about our new governor and him maybe not wanting to spend as much money on the schools. We already had a little dust up with him and our county executive about funding. And, the county executive had to hold his feet to the fire. And I worry that, all the things we want to do for Tyler Heights in the future might be gone because there's not going to be money. So I would hope that next year we could really do something about it. I think we have to. I mean, I don't see a choice. I really don't. And part of our redistricting meetings, I came up with option 7. There were, there's hundreds of options, but 7 got passed. And part of it, the reason why it did, or the reason I wrote it, was because I got the principal from Georgetown East, pulled me aside and said, hey, look, we'll take those 150 kids next year. If need be, we'll be a little bit crowded, but I think we can do it. And, that's just part of the backstory of why option 7 got written the way it did. So I hope we do something next year. I'll be back next month. So thank you all very much.
Good morning. My name is Lisa Van Buskirk. I'm from Edgewater, Maryland. I'm the mother of 2 preschoolers, and yet I feel that the school start time issue is very important. I do not want to have to still fight this issue in 10 years when I have teenagers. It's already been bubbling through the county for 10, 15 years. Let's not wait another 10, please. So, Start School Later organization continues to ask for an immediate change in school start times by adjusting the proposed 2015-2016 budget. The American Academy of Pediatrics, the Maryland Department of Health and Mental Hygiene's recent study, the County Council's resolution from Monday, and 2/3 of the respondents to the task force website all support the Board of Education and Dr. Arletto enacting immediate change in school start times. You would act with community, state, and national support to change the school start times to healthy hours for all of our students. And while I may personally want the change to begin as early as next August, I realize that there are budgetary and contractual restraints that make it nearly impossible to do so, even if the money was allotted during next year's budget. But I think certainly by January 2016, when our winter is cold and dark and our students are out in unsafe conditions, that is at minimum when we should be able to enact this process by. Related is the purchase of the transportation software. It's related and yet independent. Start School Times has brought this issue again to the forefront, but it was the 2 fiscal audits that had encouraged the purchase of transportation software. So the task force just has a greater vocal way to advocate for it. Specifically, we ask that software be purchased under the current budget so that it can be utilized for the start of next school year in August. And then using that software, we can help refine the bus times and the schedules so that by January, we can have our better, healthy school hours. Thank you. Oh, but in closing, I wanted to quote from a Tracy Chapman song that predates Miss Chaudhry because it was during my high school years. If not now, then when? You can wait and soon be sorry. If not now, what then? The moment has arrived. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Lisa Miller. I live in Edgewater. I'd like to start off by saying that that was a fascinating presentation about heroin use by Dr. Brown, and I especially like this saying in there, a quote from there, that prevention is more effective than treatment or intervention. You may have read in so many studies that have come out recently that sleep deprivation is linked to drug use. It could start off with simply with whatever a teen might find at home to help them stay awake during their first couple hours at school. Monday night, the elected officials of every district of Anne Arundel County voted unanimously for later high school start times for the 22,000 students. They voted unanimously to purchase the software now with the $12 million in excess funds in the healthcare account. You can accomplish much in the next 6 months to make later high school start times a reality for fall 2015. There's no excuse for further delay. What action will you take? There is a quote from Richard Reeves in a Wall Street Journal article. Ignoring the evidence on school start times is the equivalent to ignoring the evidence on the harmful effects of lead paint exposure, asbestos, or secondhand tobacco smoke. There's no reason to wait. Thank you.
I don't have any additional completed cards. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board at this time? Okay. We'll move on to our action items. Item 4.01, administrative personnel appointments. Dr. Olato, your recommendation, please.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend the personnel listed on the attached sheet be promoted and/or appointed.
All those in favor? Motion passes 7-0-0. Item 4.02, personnel actions. Dr. Olato?
Yes, ma'am. I recommend that the board approve the actions as stipulated on the attached sheets.
All those in favor? Motion passes 7-0-0. Next, we have a series of policy revisions. The first is 4.03. This is an information item, second reading, naming facilities policy EG.
And there's no presentation since it's a second reading. We have not received any public comment on this.
No public comments on this. Do we have any board questions?
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Webb.
I'm looking at regulation C2C. So I'm surprised we got no public comment. Where it says schools shall not be named after individuals, groups of people, or organizations. Well, we got no public comment.
We did not receive public comment on that. The only public input we received, as we discussed when this went to first reading, had to do with the committee's information that was shared at the committee meeting and making sure we had appropriate records of that so that if later in time they could go back and see. But that's the only public comment we've received. We did not receive any public comment on the specific provision that you just asked about.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any public comment at this time? Okay. Item 4.04 is policy JEF, reporting child abuse and neglect. This is also a second reading, and there were no public comments during the posting time. Are there any board questions? Are there any public comments? Okay. Item 4.05, this is policy EAA, eligible riders. This is a first reading.
The Transportation Division brings policy EAA, eligible riders, to you for first reading. This policy was last updated June 20th, 2012. The policy and its regulation is being revised to accommodate the board's request that we provide transportation for students receiving out-of-area transfers that were granted for daycare with a documented hardship. The policy will be posted on our website for 30 days. We'll answer any questions you have about this policy and regulation.
Ms. Ritchie?
in the regulation part, I think it deleted 6. I'm trying to find it on my thing. I made myself notes, and that's probably a scary thing to do. It's in the regulation. It's deleted number 6. Let me see where it is. I'll have to look for it and call you back because I can't remember. I don't know where I wrote it on here.
We have 2 more readings, so we can.
Yeah, I'll look through there again because it's not now. It's not ringing a bell. I mean, I wrote a note about it, but I can't. Okay.
Mrs. Birch?
I just want to clarify and make sure that I've got this correct, and so that the public understands. This doesn't say that all out-of-area transfers would get bus transportation, correct?
That's correct. The specific request is that out-of-area transfers that were granted for daycare with a documented hardship would receive transportation, and that would be effective for the 2016-17 school year.
Okay, so they wouldn't have to go through a second appeal process saying, okay, well, you gave me a out-of-area transfer for a documented hardship. Now I want to appeal for transportation for a documented hardship. So it's kind of letting them do both at one time.
That's correct. And then any new applicants, that would be part of the process.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Ritchie?
Oh, keep forgetting to turn that on. There was also another part in there having to do with assigned or transferred students. Let me see if I can find it in here. My question is it having to do with this assigned or transferred students. If one of the problems that we have is that we require certain documentation, and
that's in policy JAB, which is not the next policy or next.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 4.07 policy JAB. Okay,
I'll wait to that then.
Is there any public comment on this eligible rider policy? Okay, so this will now go to be posted for 30 days on the website for comments?
Yes.
Okay. Item 4.06 is policy EA, student transportation services. This is also a first reading.
Correct, and this is again being brought by Transportation Services to you for first reading. It was last updated June 20th, 2012. Like the previous policy, it's under review to accommodate the board's request to provide transportation to students receiving out-of-area transfers that were granted for documented hardships. The policy will be posted for 30 days public comment, and we'll answer any questions you have related to it.
Ms. Ritchie?
This is the one I put the wrong number on. It's number 6. So shouldn't that be rewritten so it says instead of transportation will not be provided to students given approval for out-of-area transfer? Shouldn't there be a piece that talks about the hardship? I mean, reference back or even references the previous policy regulation?
Right. We just basically took it out because it's not forbidden anymore. So we're not saying you can't do it anymore. It allows it. But if you think it would be more clear and more explicit.
But it's restricted. Because it's never been about any out-of-area transfer. Right. It's only been the out-of-area transfers who have documented hardship as we have described them.
Right.
Ms. Ritchie, for the record, Alex Checknovich, the reason we decided to do that, if you go back to the previous item identifies who is an eligible rider.
Right.
And so the eligibility via hardship, via this daycare provision, is contained within item 4.05 that we just covered. Once they're declared eligible, then they're just a regularly transported student just like anybody else. So we didn't want eligibility criteria contained within stop designation. They're really two separate things. It's much cleaner if we, under EAA, identify whether they're eligible or not, and that's contained solely there. And then once you're deemed eligible, then it's a totally different issue. Then there's just a regular transport matter, and EA covers, now that they're eligible, how do we go about transporting them?
Okay, so under purpose where it says, and the reason I'm saying this is because I know that we're, I mean, it's going to make it a little bit confusing, and people are going to read only one thing and hear something else. So like where it says to establish procedures for transporting eligible students, as determined by policy, whatever that policy number is. I mean, can you, and the reason I'm saying that is because then that gives people a way to go back. Well, yeah, that's true. Your student is eligible, but, you know, or not eligible because he's out of area transfer, or something like that. It just kind of gives it a place to go back to.
Right.
And I think that that's important in some of these where the policies are all kind of interconnected, sometimes to have those pieces back because they'll but you didn't say that's what it was here, and look, you took out transfer.
Yeah.
Just that kind of stuff.
We can make that adjustment.
Mr. Jackson?
It's just an administrative item. In background, B, last sentence, where we say these services shall be supplied in accordance with the procedures identified in section D below.
That should be C.
That should be C.
Right.
Thank you.
Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, item 4.07, the policy JAB, assignment and or transfer of students to a school. This is also a first reading.
The Division of Student Services brings policy JAB, assignment and or transfer of students to a school, to you for first reading. This policy was last updated February 6, 2008. In line with the last two policies, it is being updated to speak to the transportation issue that we just talked about, as well as additional revisions were made to the regulation to align with procedural changes because of proof of residency needs and to update with federal requirements. This policy will be posted on our website for 30 days for public comment, and we welcome any questions you have.
Mr. Jackson?
Thank you. Just for the record, I want to go over to page 4 of the regulation, 414, and I'd like for you, this is first reading, so I would like for the staff to have a conversation with the public about what section C really means relative to the changes. The staff took the opportunity, because of other issues, to clean up. When we made those changes, you cleaned up some other language and you added some language that I think requires some communication with the public to make sure they are aware of those changes.
I'd be happy to do that. For the record, my name's Gail Cicero, and this gets down to how students enroll in our school and what we're required to have presented to us by the parent or guardian at enrollment, and what we're required to maintain in the record as part of what MSDE would require of our record keeping. Prior to the re-language, so I'd like to start with where we were and then update you on the change. Everyone who entered our school system had to provide two things, and I refer to it as sort of the A list and the B list. And there had to be one from each area. You couldn't just mix it all up. And so the A part of that was you had to come forward with a mortgage, a lease, a deed, or a document that we call a tenant residency verification form. Those are the four choices, and you had to come up with one of those from that list. Then the second list that you got to choose another item from is much larger, a BGE bill, a phone bill. There are lots of choices in that area that we could select from. What we have found over time as society has changed is that we have a number of families with children that show up in Anne Arundel County, Maryland, and their children should be in school. They're of school age, and they cannot produce one of those documents. It's not part of what they have for a variety of hardship reasons and other tragic stories and difficult circumstances. And it leaves our school system employees faced on the front lines to make a choice between doing the right thing and enrolling the child in school because they need to be in school and we owe them an education, but then knowing that their record keeping is not up to state standards, and when someone comes in and audits our records, they've put the system in harm's way to answer to why our documentation is poor. So it put us in a bit of a quandary. So in order to work with families and to make sure that we didn't place frontline folks in that position, we wanted to add a category in which, and it should be sparingly, this is for exceptions, when it's impossible for a family to produce one of those records, that we can involve our coordinator of pupil services. And the reason that office is chosen because they deal with residency, out of here, all of those things around enrollment. They're the right people. When they determine that that person, it's impossible for the documents, we've built a process where we'll have a pupil personnel worker, a PPW, do a minimum of 2 home visits, do an extensive interview with the parent. The story is where you learn the circumstances and whether or not, you know, this is appropriate because other documents can't be produced. And then we'll ask that pupil personnel worker follow up with the family throughout the year. On a human level, there are families that often are disenfranchised and need our support. We need to be checking, we need to be connected. And on the other hand, their circumstances may change and they may not be residents. And we also want to be mindful that the folks who are enrolling in ACPS are in fact residents of our county. And we've done due diligence to establish that up front and then monitor in some way. So that is why that was added to the regulation, or we're asking that it be added in terms of documents. Our regulation guides what must be, and we're audited on a regular cycle. So we have the flexibility to build a process that works for us. But once we have a regulation, so without this here, we don't have the flexibility to make our own rules around the records here. And so this gives us a space to do that as appropriate with a lot of check-offs and checking into and making sure we're doing the right thing.
Thank you very, very much for explaining that. I think it's key and critical because what we're going to see in lots of cases this happening is within our ELL population and our poverty, kids in poverty. I mean, we have cases today where we've got 5 and 6 different families all living under the same roof in very transient places. And so we do want those children in school, and we do want to be able to account for those children in school, and we want them to know that we want them in school. One of the things that you just said, though, I wanted to make sure that I understand a little bit better, and we talked a little bit about this in the policy committee meeting a couple of months ago. You said the number of families you thought this is the exception. So I'm kind of interested in what do we believe those numbers may be? Are they in the 10s or 15s, or are they in the hundreds? And the reason that I'm concerned about that is because we're dealing right now with the redistricting of Tyler Heights, and we're going to find that some of these children are living in transient places that are going to feed into Tyler Heights, into Georgetown East, into places of the such. And we've got to be, as we change this regulation and policy, we've got to be able to deal with whatever that influx is. And so if I know it's a guess, but do we have some idea?
So I'll give you an educated guess, and I don't want to stand behind it because I worry that in some ways we don't know what we don't know, that some folks may never walk into our schools because they know they can't. And so, but if I had to make an honest guess, it would surprise me if I saw more than 20 cases a year, and I would guess that the most vulnerable folks that may have trouble with maintaining formal documents would reside in the Annapolis area and perhaps right on the Baltimore City, Brooklyn line. But that is a guess. So.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate the hard work in seeing this and seeing that we had a need to address this. So when we get audited, we don't have to give money back to the state. Thank you, ma'am.
Ms. Ritchie?
I had a question having to do with tuition and I think it's page 6. Yeah, 6 of 14. How do we determine the tuition? Who determines the tuition? Does it change yearly? I mean, tell me a little something about that.
It does. It changes annually. I haven't seen it fluctuate much. That number we actually get from your department every year, and I'm not sure where it comes from prior.
Ms. Ritchie, it comes from essentially the cost to educate a child. So it's essentially makes us whole for the true costs of educating any of our other youngsters as well. So we take the budget and we calculate the per pupil costs, and that's how we arrive at the tuition. And the reason it's not fluctuated very much recently is our revenue has not grown very much recently, so our expenditures per child have remained relatively flat over the course of the last 5 or 6 years.
Because we get a per pupil allotment every year from the, I mean, that's in our that's how they develop our budget and so forth. And so then we take that number and then we add to it because there's, they may give us $9,000 or whatever the thing is, but there's also the cost of transportation that's not included in that, and some of the other pieces that aren't included in there.
Right. It's essentially an average cost across our district to educate a youngster, and that is how we come up with that tuition rate.
I just was wondering.
Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, thank you. Item 4.08, this is policy KC, community use of school facilities, also a first reading.
The Chief Operating Officer brings policy KC, community use of school facilities, to you for first reading. This policy was last updated April 4th, 2007. This policy and its accompanying regulation are updated to reflect the current practice and provide scripted procedures for the use of AACPS facilities. This policy and its regulation will be posted on our website for 30 days for public comment. We will answer any questions that you have related to this policy.
Ms. Ritchie?
There's reference in there about where the community can use the facilities manuals. There's a manual of some sort to be found. Where is that manual?
The manual is available online, ma'am.
It's online. Okay, and that's and what's the commercial rate? Where's that found?
That again, that is calculated. We do that twice a year based on the cost of operating the facility. So it's adjusted twice a year based on utility rates, custodial salary rates, et cetera. So we have a schedule. There's a form to apply for using one of our facilities, and then we have a schedule that talks about the rental rates for different areas. So just to rent the whole building is different than just to rent the gymnasium, et cetera. And then there's a separate schedule that talks about whether you do or don't want air conditioning, for example. And again, that's all together. So if any applicant wants to use one of our buildings, all of that information, including the application form and all the rates, are available online, and the manual guiding or governing the use of it.
Oh, okay. I didn't know it was online. All right, good. And then the thing is, there's something in here. The equipment has been deleted. The use of school. I think it has to do with the kitchen. Use of equipment.
Most of the information that was deleted that had specifics are in the community use facilities manual.
Oh, okay.
Thought being that as regulations, different things change, the manual is easy to update and make sure it's in alignment with the current requirements.
Okay, because I know that sometimes you can use the kitchen, but you can't use the equipment. And if you use the equipment, then you have to have a staff member there to use the equipment. I mean, like I couldn't use the stove. Have to have, and I'm talking about that when we used to do events and things like
yes,
that.
Yes, ma'am,
okay.
And that's all actually not driven by Anne Arundel County regulations. That's all driven by the health department regulations.
Right,
you have to have certain certifications and credentials to use certain elements of a kitchen. And again, that's all driven by the health department.
But it's all found in this manual, so that's
right.
That's
and so that's
okay.
a very perfect example, as Ms. Kutch has said, as the health department continues to revise the regulations as they do, we wouldn't have to keep coming back to you to continuously change your policy or reg. We can tie the manual to the health department's codes.
That makes sense to me.
Mr. Jackson?
Thank you. I want to go back to this manual. It was my understanding when this came through in December that the manual wasn't yet complete, that it was being revised. Is that not a true statement?
There is an existing manual that is available. It's being revised, and the timing of issuing the revision will be to incorporate these. So we don't want to post the new manual up until when this document goes through its revision cycle. We'll marry those two down. We'll take down the old manual and post the new one up to coincide with the adoption of this new policy.
So we're anticipating that manual will be approved in like 60 days?
Right. Again, we're targeting it based on your adoption cycle of this, if you so choose to.
And the reason I ask and make the comment is because one of the things that I don't want to do is, for example, our religious organizations, I don't want them to feel like they're jerked around because the manual has changed 2 or 3 times in one particular year. And so just some level of sensitivity. A lot of these items are being pulled out of regulation and they're being put in the manual, which is fine. I just want to make sure there's some level of stability in that review process and whatever that review process is, because I don't want feedback I don't want feedback from the community that ends up saying that, well, I can't keep up with everything because they're changing it 2 or 3 times in a manual. Fair enough? Okay, thank you.
I had a question on page 4 of 7 of the regulation. Item 2, use of AACPS facilities for religious services. Is there a reason why we're specifically citing or singling out religious institutions as opposed to just having a section for nonprofits versus for-profits or civic groups or things like that?
So let me tackle this one first. We have always had, since I've served here at Anne Arundel County Schools, and I don't know what the inception date is, but we have always had purposefully a section that deals with the religious use of our buildings, and specifically a lot of, and the genesis is essentially that a lot of churches start out very small. They don't have the capital, they don't have the budgets to begin day one and construct a church day one. So what this, the intent of this, as I understand it, was to allow new churches that are being established or stood up, to allow them to be able to utilize our facilities, which is lawful and purposeful, but utilize our facilities for a period of time while they grow the size of their congregation, while they expand their budgets and their savings, etc., and then to transition them out of our buildings to a piece of property or a lease space that is under their control.
So what happens for like the Girl Scouts of Central Maryland or some group like that, and different nonprofit group? They're not getting the reduced rate.
That is correct, and then but then again, they're not trying to build their own building typically. I mean, Girl Scouts of America has one building up in Baltimore that sort of runs the whole show. So I think the churches is sort of a very unique niche in our rental market, and again, this predates any of us here, but again, it was very purposely done by prior administrations, by prior boards, to allow a span of time, a bridge to allow startup churches to stand up, grow their congregation again, amass some savings, and then to come out of our properties and into something that they either own outright or have some sort of a lease arrangement on.
So what I'm hearing from some pastors in West County anyway is that there's sort of been a change of perspective in some of our religious communities because of the times and decreasing attendance in some of the groups that are out, that they don't wish to necessarily ever build a building anymore, and that they would like to be using facilities in the community to establish like a community-based religious experience for whether it's in a school or another place in the community. So this paragraph, if we're going to keep it for strictly for religious services, then the time frame, the limitation on the time might become a problem too, if this is sort of a changing trend among our pastors. And I'm not sure if it's the same all over the county, but that's what I've been hearing in West County anyway.
The other issue would be the addition of the last line on that page, that the religious organization needs to provide us evidence of a short-term occupancy.
Just seems to be at odds with what's trending out there. Mrs. Birch?
Well, as I'm looking at it, it does seem to say that they would pay commercial rates after 5 years. So they just lose their discount if they're there longer than 5 years.
That's correct.
Which in a way makes sense, because if they were going to rent space anywhere else, they wouldn't get a discount either. So, I mean, in that sense, that makes sense. So, if you really are trying to build a church somewhere else, then that makes sense that you would want the discount for the first 5 years. It helps you. But after 5 years, if you're really not going anywhere else, then there's no reason for the school system to give you a discount, because you're just renting the school.
And that is the way it has always been interpreted, Ms. Burge.
So if they really aren't planning on going anywhere else, we would just change them to regular rates and they would just pay rent like anybody else would for coming
Right.
in.
We communicate with them at least on a yearly basis, and they have to demonstrate to us that they are making progress towards some sort of a off-premises facility, either under their own control or at least arrangement, et cetera. But we are in fairly steady dialogue with all of our church users.
Or at this point, would we tell them that they have to find somewhere else if they're not making progress towards that? Or do we allow them to stay indefinitely if they're willing to pay commercial rates?
They can stay indefinitely. They just would begin paying the full rate
Okay.
as if they were any other user.
Okay, so there's no problem with what the folks in West County want.
Except for item 2B3, providing evidence of need of short-term occupancy.
I think that's if they want to continue the lower rates. If they would like to stay, they may stay, but we're not going to continue giving them a discount if they're not actually working to build a church.
Okay.
That's you don't get a discount if you're not working towards something.
Right.
If you're just using us as a place, then you have to pay the rates everyone else does. Every other nonprofit, everyone else. That I think, and I think that's fair. Every other nonprofit's doing it too. So I think maybe if we explain that to them, that they're welcome to stay as long as they want, but after 5 years, you're paying regular rates.
Yeah, I think there's just some misinformation out there that they think they're limited to 5 years. Mr. Jackson?
Yeah, I think there's misinformation out there because it's written. If you look on page 5 of 7C, what's here, and we haven't changed other than the words we've extracted of education, it says the board may approve religious organization usage beyond 5 years. The board may grant up to two-year extensions based on information related to future building plans provided by the religious organization. If that doesn't give them any opportunity, it doesn't even give the board. Matter of fact, it ties our hands as a board where you can only stay in one of our facilities for 9 years. 5 years granted by the superintendent. The superintendent in 2A on page 4 of 7 of the regulation says the superintendent may approve up to the first 5 years of religious organization usage of an AACPS facility and shall inform the board of such approvals. So the superintendent only has the ability by this regulation to approve up to 5 years, and then it goes to the fact that it must come to the board for two-year extensions. So a religious organization can't stay forever. A religious organization has to get out within the 9-year period by this regulation. Now, maybe I'm misreading it, but I don't think I am.
And that has not been our practice. Our practice, Mr. Jackson, is directly aligned with what Ms. Burge was indicating, that those elements have always been tied to the reduced rental rate. If they come in as any other commercial, for-profit, nonprofit, et cetera, entity, they could use the building for 15 or 20 years, but they would be paying market rate essentially.
Well, then I believe that we need to make some modification to align with our practices, because right now the wording here doesn't align to that. Fair enough?
Yeah, I think that the issue's been raised, and we can certainly address language to sort of make sure we're covering all bases of the intent of what I just heard from the board, as well as what our current practice is, so that we're not leaving churches out, since it seems the intent is to allow them to continue just at the commercial rate. So we can take care of that before the next reading.
I also think that we need to very closely look at what we're saying the board can go do in regulation versus the fact that we may need to be addressing what the board can go do in policy. Thank you, ma'am.
Ms. Burge?
I just wanted to comment that of course they could continue as any other business, because this school system is not in the business of discriminating against churches and not allowing them to do things that other organizations are allowed to do. And if other organizations are allowed to rent at a commercial rate, then of course a church is allowed to rent at a commercial rate. And we would not be not allowing churches to do something that everyone else is allowed to do. It's just that they are no longer allowed to do something that everyone else is not allowed to do at that point. So I think that perhaps this was not eloquently written when it was first written, but I don't think that our school system would ever have done something that violated someone's rights, which is what everyone was interpreting it to do. So I think, certainly rewriting it to be appropriate is a good idea.
Mr. Webb.
Speaking of discrimination, I think our policy should reflect that any organization that's using our property adhere to our policies regarding discrimination, ethics, and probably a few other things that I'll take a look at with the policy committee to see what might need be included in that.
Mrs. Birch.
I've discussed this with Mr. Webb and staff before, and I do not agree with him. I think that our non-discrimination policy goes much further than anything we should require of any of our organizations. If that were the case, we would not be allowed to have churches in any of our buildings. We would not be allowed to have the Boy Scouts in our buildings. I think that we need to look at ourselves as a community resource, and our non-discrimination policies are very broad because we are a public school system. And if we require our policies on every organization that uses our building for anything, that we're not doing an appropriate service to the community.
In fact, Ms. Burge, our largest user is the Rec and Parks Department. Their policy is different than ours, so we would be eliminating Rec and Parks use of our buildings as well.
So the county can no longer do
Correct.
Mr. Webb.
Yes, Mr. Shaknovich, when you get a chance, I'd like to see a copy of the Parks and Recs regulations just to see how close they are to what we've got on the books for ourselves.
And just as a point of clarification, any third party that uses our building, if they feel like they've been discriminated against, we do have a process in place through our other policies, regulations, and practices. So I think that the concern that Mr. Webb raised, that if somebody does feel that they were mistreated for being part of a protected class, we look into every allegation that comes our way. So there is a process by which such complaints can be heard and dealt with appropriately.
Mrs. Ritchie?
I think we kind of go down a slippery slope. I mean, we want to make sure that we're letting our buildings to people who are open and inclusive of all, who want to be a part of whatever they are. And when we start, then, if I'm hearing what you're saying right, if I run ABC something in our schools and I discriminate about any woman who has blonde hair and is under 5'4", I don't let them come in. Anybody above that can come to you all and say we're discriminating against them?
If the situation that you described was a person of a protected class, first of all, anyone can file a complaint. We know we receive things all the time. If that person that you described was as part of a protected class, the EEOC has guided us that we do have to receive that complaint and then have a process in which to respond to that person. We do have that in place. So yes, we would receive a complaint if somebody said that they felt that the third party that was using our building maltreated them for a reason which falls into one of the protected classes. We would receive that complaint, see if there's any legitimacy to it, investigate or not investigate depending on whether there's any legitimacy to it, and then provide that person with a response.
Because that then is like way out of our realm.
The EEOC says that it's our obligation as a public
if it's
entity.
in our school system and stuff, but now we're talking about having to go to other organizations and and things like that. I just that's a concern because how much do we invest? I don't think a lot of time happens, and I don't think that a lot of time we probably aren't doing that a lot. But the one time that it does happen, what does that mean for us, and what do we have the capability and capacity to do that kind of stuff? It's kind of.
Mr. Webb.
So if I'm to understand you correctly, if someone rents one of our facilities and one of their employees has a case, discrimination or whatever, we're responsible for investigating that?
They can file a complaint with us if they feel that something has gone wrong on our property. We would have to then investigate what role or control we had regarding that particular situation.
Would that be normal that they would file the complaint with us?
I would imagine, and this is what happens in typical cases, is someone would file in many cases, as some of the employee appeals you get, they sometimes go to the Maryland Human Relations Commission as well as our Office of Investigation. So they may file in multiple places. I wouldn't think as a complainant that would be my first place to go, understanding that the school system really doesn't have control over the employment of those that just provide the discrimination, but we do not close the door on the complaints if they come in.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Jackson.
Just a quick question. Is the standard that they're judged on based off of our policies and regulations, or based off the federal government, or based off state government, or all of the above? Or
it would depend on the particular situation. I don't think you can give a broad answer such as that. I mean, it would really depend on the particular situation.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, 4.09. This is policy BCC, Board Executive Sessions, and this is also first reading.
The President of the Board of Education brings BCC, Board Executive Sessions, for first reading. The policy was last updated June 20th, 1993. The revisions to this policy provide alignment and compliance with the state government article, the education article, and the Code of Maryland regulations. The policy will be posted on our website for 30 days for public comment, and we welcome any questions you have.
Ms. Ritchie?
On position C, 1A, where it says the board meets in closed session, the presiding officer shall conduct a recorded vote on the closing of the session. Shouldn't in public be added to that? Because we close in public. We come out in public, we do the closing of the session, then we go into closed session. Here, I mean, in terms of in light of the transparency and all these kind of things.
Ms. Ritchie, I think we could fix that by saying a public recorded vote.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying whatever the public thing needs to be. And do we need to address, and I'm not sure we do on here, there's been some talk about the board workshops. While they are workshops, not necessarily I mean, they're public meetings, they're open meetings and stuff, but we don't take action. We don't vote on things. We don't do stuff in a workshop. It's not a anyway. Do we need to mention that in here any place? Do we need to talk about board workshops or anything like that?
I don't think it's required to do that simply because of the interpretation of a public meeting. And if the board holds a workshop to talk about use of school facilities, since that's a hot topic lately, then that's a public meeting. If there's a quorum of the board, that's a public meeting unless you close under one of the specialized executive session topics. So it's,
for instance, like the budget meeting, when we have the budget workshops, we ask questions, but we don't take any votes on things.
you don't need to vote to make something a meeting, a public meeting.
Well, I mean, we don't do any action kind of things on those. We may ask questions about those kind of things, but so my question then is, and there's been some angst about whether we closed or whether we did something improperly or behind people's backs or something like that. I mean, it's a public meeting, and so I just wondered if that has to be addressed in any way. I don't know how it would be or if it is, but I mean,
in this particular policy, the answer is no.
Okay.
Because this is only about closed sessions.
All right.
Mr. Jackson.
Just two items. One's an administrative item. 2A, first page, 1 of 3 of the policy, after appointees, 2A, appointees, comma, employees.
Okay.
And then the more substantive comment has to do on page 3 of 3, which is number 4. All matters discussed in executive session shall be treated confidentially by the board and its members. I think we talked about this on the actual committee day that we wanted to clarify that language to also include both the superintendent staff, the superintendent and the superintendent staff included in that item. It was agreed upon, and it didn't show up in the first reading language. So if it could please show up in the second reading language, I'd appreciate that.
We can make that adjustment.
Okay, and then we're hoping to be able to also be able to address, as we discuss minutes for our meetings, to be able to take care of these. Thank you.
Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, 4.10, I think this is our last one. Policy IKA, opening and patriotic exercises, and this is also a first reading.
The Office of School Performance and the Division of Curriculum and Instruction bring policy IAK, opening and patriotic exercises, to you for first reading. This policy was last updated May 20th, 1991, and rescinds the opening exercises policy that was last revised on the same date. The policy and its regulations provides requirements for the school system for opening and patriotic exercises in compliance with the education article of the Annotated Code of Maryland. This policy will be posted on our website for 30 days for public comment, and we welcome any questions you have related to this policy.
Mrs. Ritchie?
And this is just, this is one of those may shall kind of things. I'm not sure. A C1, where it says opening exercises, principals and teachers in all schools may require all students to. We can't require anybody. We can require them to be respectful while other people take the pledge, but we can't require people who may not want to take the Pledge of Allegiance. I mean, do the pledge. We can't require them to do it. We can request that they do it. I know, but I'm talking about here the procedure. So when the opening exercises, and again, it may be one of those.
And so this is a clarification piece. I was lost for a second. So typically, when we only have one definition, we don't have a separate definition section. We put it in the procedures. And I think what needs to happen here is that opening exercises just needs to be bolded and italicized so that it stands out as an actual definition. All that is defining opening exercises. Oh no, that's not.
No, it's
That's
the procedure.
Not right.
It's saying may require all students present to participate in opening exercises on each morning of the school day. We can request them to participate, but we can't require them to participate.
Okay, I have a better answer.
Okay,
this is the right answer. I apologize. I got off track. So Education Article 7104, this is mirroring that language, and that says principals and teachers in each public elementary and secondary school in the state may require all students to be present and participate in opening exercises on each morning of a school day. So that's where that language.
Yeah, so a state thing, then that's fine.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It mirrors the state language.
That's fine. I mean, when I read that, I thought, well, somebody could stand up and say, well, you can't require me to do it. You can request me to do it. But if that's state language, I'm good.
Yeah, that's the education article.
Yeah, okay, no problem.
Sorry about the first answer.
Not a problem.
So participate could just be stand there and be present.
Correct.
Well, that's why I said
Yeah.
that. You know what I mean? But that's what I was talking about. But if it's in
Right, and the reason it's, again, we combined two policies. The opening exercises policy used to be just that number one. That was the entire policy. So seeing as these were related issues, we put them in one policy, and that's how it ended up being just number one.
Mr. Webb?
Yes, I just wanted to commend you all for the amount of policies and regulations you've done over the past year. Thank you, Mr. Jackson and Ms. Ritchie. I think we've at least doubled the output. Oh, you didn't do them? Oh, it's Ms. Burge. Well, thank you, Ms. Burge. And Ms. Chaudhry. You guys have done a wonderful job. Thank you.
Mr. Jackson?
Well, and I'll have to give the credit to the staff. I mean, the very first meeting, Dr. Arlotto, remember this? We didn't think we could get through in an hour 7 policies. And I think we did that in less than an hour and a half. So really and truly the staff, and yes, that's Jessica, but yes, that's legal. And yes, that's a lot of educators in the system that also participate in a lot of that, along with the Chief Operating Officer's Department and a lot of other folks, to include curriculum and instruction and everything. So thank you all for, this is just the first 7 months. And we didn't even meet last month because of snow. So I'm looking forward to sitting down with Dr. Alato, with Bob Mosier, and with Jessica here coming up in the next couple of weeks to talk about what we're going to do in the remaining 3 or 4 months, because there's not a lot of time left in this school year.
Thank you. Item 4.11, Millersville Elementary School Gymnasium Addition Design Development. This is an information to action item. Can I have a motion to move this from information to action? All those in favor? We now have an action item. Dr. Alato, your recommendation?
Yes, ma'am. I recommend the approval of the Millersville Elementary School Gymnasium Addition Design Development.
Are there any board questions? Is there any public comment? We have a motion on the floor that's been properly made and seconded. All those in favor? Motion passes 7-0-0. Item 4.12 is the Woodside Elementary School Gymnasium Addition Design Development. Can I have a motion to move this from information to action? All those in favor? Dr. Alato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend the approval of the Woodside Elementary School Gymnasium Addition Design Development.
Any board questions? Any public comment? All those in favor? Motion passes 7-0-0. Thank you. Item 4.13 is the Chesapeake Science Point Public Charter School contract renewal, and this is an information to action item. Do I have a motion to move this from information to action? All those in favor? Motion passes. We have an action item. Dr. Alato, your recommendation, please.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend a 5-year charter contract renewal for Chesapeake Science Point Public Charter School with no expanded enrollment.
And we have a staff presentation.
We do. Thank you. Good afternoon, President Korbalak, Vice President Nally, Dr. Olato, members of the board. For the record, my name is Pat Crane, Senior Manager of Alternative Programs. At this time, I'd like to take the opportunity to allow my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Kathy Lane, Executive Director of Alternative Education.
Good afternoon. Ray Bebo, Regional Assistant Superintendent.
Good afternoon. Ilkay Gürbüz, Principal at Chesapeake Science Point.
Good afternoon. Sarah Blair, CSP Governing Board President.
The 2014-2015 school year represents the third and final year of Chesapeake Science Point's charter contract. AACPS staff began to work in early July with Chesapeake Science Point's leadership, governing board, and operator to initiate a comprehensive charter renewal process. The charter renewal process included many steps and levels of review. Specifically, the renewal process included a rigorous renewal application which was submitted to AACPS staff in October, as well as a 2-day site review which included an instructional review and multiple stakeholder interviews. Further, a financial audit was performed by an outside firm which looked specifically at the school's internal financial controls. It's important to understand that although the charter renewal process began this past July, AACPS has been monitoring the progress of Chesapeake Science Point since its inception by way of ongoing AACPS staff oversight, annual site reviews, and compliance monitoring. The 3 renewal reports, Exhibits A, B, and C, were developed using a variety of qualitative and quantitative data compiled over the school's current charter term. We believe these reports accurately and transparently reflect the progress that Chesapeake Science Point has made over the past 3 years, as well as areas that are in need of attention and continued monitoring. At this time, I would like to highlight some of the key findings outlined in these reports. The following commendations reflect the strengths of Chesapeake Science Point. Since CSP's last charter renewal in 2012, the school, its operator, and governing board have worked diligently to satisfy the Board of Education's required renewal conditions while working collaboratively with AACPS to ensure compliance to their charter agreement. Additionally, CSP continues to provide a strong academic program which is supported by MSA and HSA assessment data. CSP's culture and climate remains positive, and its diverse student body allows for a rigorous learning environment. This past spring, CSP graduated its first class of 30 seniors. 100% of these students matriculated onto 2- or 4-year colleges and universities. And finally, CSP remains a viable educational option for families throughout Anne Arundel County, as evidenced by almost 600 enrollment applications for the 2015-2016 school year. In addition to some of the strengths just mentioned, it's also important to highlight some of the areas which Chesapeake Science Point is continuing to refine and improve upon as they seek their next charter term. While CSP student outcomes remain strong, implementing reviewer instructional recommendations should lead to even more impressive student outcomes. As CSP's high school program grows and develops, CSP should be mindful of the programmatic elements needed to provide high-quality college and career readiness counseling. CSP should implement financial auditor recommendations in order to ensure the highest level of internal control structures. While the governance structure has made great strides over the past 3 years, the school's governing board should continue to make improvements in the areas of strategic planning, governance training, and working towards becoming a recognized nonprofit entity. At this time, the review team is in support of the renewal of a new 5-year charter contract for Chesapeake Science Point. We feel confident that Chesapeake Science Point has already begun taking the steps necessary to address deficit areas and implement reviewer recommendations. Thank you for the opportunity to provide you with an overview of the renewal process and recommended findings for Chesapeake Science Point. We are available to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
I don't have any questions up here. Mr. Jackson.
I'll be quick. I guess I'll start by saying, seriously, thank you to all of you, because we're in a different place than we were several years ago. And it's because, not because AACPS lowered its standards, but because CSP has worked really hard, and AACPS as well has worked really hard administration-wise, because you all are a part of AACPS. We have worked collaboratively together to really get to where we're not talking about renewal or not. We're talking about, to some extent, expansion or not. And so I appreciate, every single one of you. It's the small things that are presented here, even in this boardroom. You're all sitting on the same side of the table, of the podium. It's those small things that matters, and it shows right here in the boardroom. And so, thank you very, very much. I would be interested in seeing the financial audit, because I don't know that I have seen that. I would like to continue the conversation on building stronger business practices within CSP, so that when you come back in 3, 4, 5 years, should at that point you want to expand, the relationship and bridges have been built and things have been put in place in order to potentially maybe do those kinds of things. And so I commend all of you all for the hard work and effort, because you see it play out walking across the graduation stage like we all did, most of us right here, the 5 of you all in the room, and it was an exceptional thing for those 30 children. And so they're off doing great things right now, and I appreciate what you all have done in showing that passion to the kids, because the kids will in turn show the passion for education. So thank you, ma'am.
Mrs. Ritchie?
What's the current capacity of the building that you're in? What's the student capacity now for your kids?
If I'm not wrong, it's around 786. That's what the state-rated capacity I can remember of.
And what are your class sizes? What's the average class size?
Currently in the high school, it's around 18. And we have classes 10 or 20, 22, not more than 22. In the middle school, it's 25.
25? Okay. And how many of the middle school students, what's the percentage of middle school students who are eligible for high school who apply for the high school program or decide to go back to their home school?
In the past years, our experience is 70 to 80% of our students stay with CSB, while the rest may choose to go a private school or homeschool, or mainly actually IB program or STEM program type of programs in our district.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I don't have any more board questions. How about any public comment? Okay, Mr. Webb.
Mr. G, I'm still waiting for my invitation to come out for tea. That's my board statement. I did the graduation ceremony for the 8th grade class, and I must say they were very impressive. The skill sets that they came out of the 8th grade with are skill sets that I haven't seen with a lot of the seniors who have graduated from high school. So I'm looking forward to their progress through the next 4 years.
Mrs. Ritchie.
I just wanted to clarify the recommendation, and the motion was to continue to renew the charter without expansion. Is that correct? Is that what I heard you say?
Correct.
Okay, I just,
Yes.
because it wasn't on the paper here, and I'm thinking, I think I heard you say that, but I want to make sure. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Burge.
I also had the opportunity to go to high school graduation last year, which I very much enjoyed. Thank you for inviting us to that. And I'm pleased with the progress that's been made by all parties. I really am. I, like Mr. Jackson, would like to see the financial audit, which I haven't done because that does remain one area that still does concern me. I've never questioned the quality of the education that the students there were getting. It's always been sort of more of a management issue for me. And I live in the neighborhood and I hear things. And so that's always been more of my concern. So that's something that I would like to look at. I hear that PTA is running money that I just hear things, and I'd like to see the financial.
Well, and to your comment and Mr. Jackson's comments, as of the writing of this report, the financial audit was in draft form.
Okay.
We've just been given recently a more final draft of that, so I would say within the next week or so that audit should be finalized, and we will be sending that to you all upon finalization of that report.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Jackson.
I would also like for you to send that to our board auditor as well. I would like for Mr. Fedowitz to take a look at that, if you don't mind. And then the last item that I wanted to mention had to do, I just on Sunday and Monday of this past week spent time with about 800 or 900 other school board members across our country. They were invited here, as they are every the first weekend in February, to the NSBA, National School Boards Association 2015 Advocacy Institute, where they come in and they talk about talking to their congressmen and senators, and then they go over, actually yesterday they were over on the Hill having a conversation with their individual congressmen, and they bring in, and on that Sunday and Monday schedule, they bring in various speakers and so forth. But one of the breakout sessions had to do with telling stories about teachers, educators, and children. To help bring that story, helping to make it real for our legislators across the nation. One story was said about a child, about an educator out in Iowa or Missouri, excuse me. But another story that was shared was about our very own Jack Andreka. And as everyone knows where he came from, it was a powerful story that was shared with all the folks that were in the room for that particular session. And I share that with you all because he is now touching, I know he's done other things, but this was just one more example of him now touching our school board members with his story and where that came from. And I was actually able to just raise my hand up and say, yeah, I'm from Anne Arundel County. I'm a small piece. And so I want to thank you all for making that happen for him and for others that are coming along behind him. Thank you.
I don't have any more board comments or questions, and I don't think we had any public comments. So I just want to thank you for all the progress that's been made. I know I was out there watching the meeting last time as I was going through the application process to be on the board, and it lasted till like 2 a.m. or something crazy. So thank you. Yeah, we do. We still need to vote. Motion on the floor that's been properly made and seconded to support the superintendent's recommendation. All those in favor? Motion passes 7-0-0.
Thank you.
Item 4.14 is the legislative update, and this is an information to action item as well. Do I have a motion to move this from information to action? All those in favor? We now have an action item. Ms. Gutchess.
The General Assembly convened on January 14th, and the bills on your exhibit are for your action, information, and review. Just to go over the exhibit that you're looking at, specifically Section 1, it contains bills on which we are asking the board to take a formal position. Section 2 includes bills that are just for your information, and Section 3 contains bills that are already covered by the board's 2015 legislative program. With that, we'll start with Section 1, asking for positions on bills. Starting with HB 19, Truant Students System of Active Intervention Requirements. This bill essentially requires an individualized re-engagement plan for students who are truant, similar to an IEP plan for students that are special ed students. We are recommending that you oppose this bill. This board, with the exception of one person, did oppose this bill last school year. We believe that AACPS already has an active system in place to intervene and correct the problem of truancy, and this bill would require significantly more staffing and funding to develop these individualized re-engagement plans for truant students. We don't feel this is the most effective strategy to combat this problem. Our recommendation is that you oppose this bill.
Any board questions? Mr. Webb?
Yes. Do we know the effectiveness of our current strategy?
I can't speak to specific data points or anything like that, but if that's something that you need from Student Services, we could get some data on that.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
I'm going to oppose. I'm going to oppose this, but I would like to see, what our strategy is and how effective it has been. I think it would be good to know.
Is there any public comment? All those in favor of opposing this bill? Motion passes 7-0.
Next bill, HB 22, Education, Privacy of Education Records and Personal Information of Students. This bill restricts the collection and disclosure of educational records or personally identifiable information contained in the education records of students as only necessary or required for stated reasons that are delineated in the bill. Essentially, this bill is being driven by some surveys that were given to students that parents objected to. The information as far as protecting students' privacy and their student records is already covered federally by FERPA, the Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act. So this wouldn't be adding any extra precautions that we don't already offer for FERPA. And these surveys that really drove this bill are already opt-out surveys. So if parents do not want their students to participate in those surveys, which may ask about drugs or sexual activity of teenagers, that sort of thing, they can opt out. This bill essentially would make it an opt-in, so only students whose parents opted in would participate in such surveys. This is a concern given that they are federal. The two surveys that we're talking about are federally and state mandated. So for those reasons, we're asking that you oppose this bill.
So moved.
Mrs. Birch.
It's also my understanding, because this is one that we discussed in great length at our May legislative meeting, that the information, it's mainly the health survey that parents are very upset about. The information that is gleaned from the survey is vital to our health department and to the state health department in figuring out what's going on with our kids. And if there were, basically, I believe this bill would require an opt-in requirement instead of an opt-out requirement for students. And if that were the case, our health departments would no longer be able to get the information that they need, because it would be nearly impossible to get the participation necessary to find out the information that they need. There is no way to identify a specific student who answered the questions. Absolutely no way. No one would know that your kid is the one who's doing drugs 5 times a week, even though you might want to know that. There's no way to go back and say that it's your kid. So if we go this way in Maryland, it will be disastrous as we're trying to fight our heroin problem and all the other problems that we have here amongst our students. So I strongly suggest that we oppose this bill.
Mr. Jackson.
Question on the opt-in, opt-out. How do we opt out now?
The parents have an option, so they'll be notified that the survey is going out, and they can choose to say, I don't want my child to participate in this survey.
So Bob Mosier puts out a notification, and then the parent can go to their teacher and say, I don't want my child doing that. Is that how it works in Anne
I
Arundel County?
specifically don't know how the notification, if it goes out. I would imagine it's not Bob Mosier. I would imagine it's a school, because they're not every student in the school system takes the survey. They identify particular schools and areas, and that's a little bit out of my expertise to say exactly
That's fine.
logistically how they're getting that information.
Could you, could whomever knows in the system, could somebody just educate me on how that is done, if that's okay?
We can get you that information.
Thank you, ma'am.
Is there any public comment on this item? All those in favor of opposing this bill? Motion passes 7-0.
HB 65, Education Maintenance of Effort Lease Payment Exclusion. This bill establishes that lease payments made by a county board of education to provide a private entity holding title to property used for a particular public school by a county board shall be excluded from the maintenance of effort calculation. We feel that this bill would put a school system into an untenable position of absorbing new operating cost without obliging the county government to reimburse us for the cost. This would have to be accounted for in the operating budget in some manner. There's no guarantee we would get funds from year to year if entering into a lease. So for those reasons, we suggest that you oppose this bill.
Mrs. Ritchie.
This is very confusing to me because I was trying to read the whole bill, which was my first mistake. And basically, I think what this is saying, and so correct me if I'm wrong, that we as an entity can go out and lease a building. For instance, when the mall closed Hex or Macy's, whatever one they closed, and they had that big empty space, there was talk around maybe using that space for arts things. So we could have then, as a board, gone out and leased that space in the mall to be used for us. Because we currently don't do that. Is that correct? I mean, we don't have any buildings. We're not leasing anything right now. Is that correct?
On a de minimis basis. So, for example, technically we're leasing the building that Mary Moss exists in.
Okay.
For $1 a year, we're leasing a couple of square feet in a heritage building right next door. But again, it's government to government. It's not
Right.
private.
Yeah. So we're not going out to the mall and saying we want to lease that building. So that on those kind of things, and I think go through the process. I think that this is to help us to be able to maybe stand up a building much quicker than if we were trying to build it by ourselves. I think that's what the intent of this is. And you all can't speak to it because you didn't write the bill, but I think that's the intent, is to be able to go out and just, instead of us trying to build a new elementary school where there's overcrowding, if there's a vacant something there, we could lease that building and put an elementary school in there. And then, but this doesn't guarantee that the county government will fund us. I mean, it may do it for this year, but 3 years from now, or 4 years from now, when a new board is all in there, they may say we're not doing stuff like that, and so therefore they're not obligated. It's just asking that they not do it. It's not, would this bill obligate them to be able to do that?
No, and that's exactly the reason for our recommendation of opposition, because if we were to lease a building and put children in that building and have them go to school in that building, and then the county decides that they no longer want it to fund that lease payment, we would have to absorb it in our operating budget. It would not be included in what they're mandated to give us. So that's the primary reason for our recommendation of opposition.
But that doesn't preclude us from going out and developing partnerships. So if we have an entity who says we want to build you a school because we want to build houses here, we could very well say yes, because then they deed it back to us. We don't lease that from them. But that doesn't prevent us from entering these kind of partnerships.
Correct. That law already exists on the books and has since about the mid-2000s. So we have a variety of alternative financing mechanisms that are provided in state law already, and the one you described is the public-private partnerships is absolutely one that's already existing in state law.
Yeah, because I have real concerns about obligating future people to bills, and bills I mean, you know, money bills, where we don't have any, there's no teeth into it. And
Mrs. Birch.
I think it's also, I guess, important to note, we could enter into such a lease to have someone build a school for us right now and pay them yearly payments for 20 years until the school was paid for. And then, you know, what would happen to the building at that point, I'm not sure. It would depend on the contract. But the way the law exists now, those would be operating payments, and they would be built into maintenance of effort.
Yes, ma'am.
And I believe that the concern, from what I understand, having spoken to sponsor and others, is that they don't want it to be added into maintenance of effort, because after 20 years, or whenever the payments ended, they don't want that $1 million payment to continue to come to the school system, because it's paid off now. And they don't want that operating money that's no longer going to a lease payment to continue coming to the school system. And I understand that. I wouldn't want to keep paying $1 million payment to the school system either. But the alternative, from my perspective, is if it's not part of maintenance of effort, I don't know that I'm still going to get the $1 million every year to make the payment. I mean, that's the crux. So even if this bill passed, I don't think the school system would ever enter into an agreement under, I think it would actually prevent us from entering into such an agreement that we now might enter into. Like, now we might possibly enter into a lease arrangement because we would be guaranteed the money to pay the future bills. If this bill passed, I think it would no longer be wise for this school system to enter into that type of agreement, because we would no longer be guaranteed that we would have the funding to pay the bills. Because there is, and I don't know if there's a way to amend the bill to guarantee that. If there were a way to amend the bill to guarantee it, I might consider supporting it, but I can't see a way to amend the bill to force future county governments to fund us. But what I see this bill doing right now is eliminating a tool in our tool bag, not giving us a new tool in our tool bag. And that's the problem I see with the bill, is that it's taking away a tool that we currently have, because all of a sudden we can no longer use leases because we don't know that we're going to have the money in the future. And I don't know if you agree with that statement. I mean, could you recommend that we enter into a lease agreement if we didn't know that we had the money to pay it in the future?
You would never get that recommendation from me.
But currently, could you recommend that we do it? Okay, thank you. So you agree this bill would take away one of the tools in our tool bag for school construction?
It wouldn't take it away. It would just no longer be a recommendation that I would bring to you. It would exist, but it would be...
But it would not be useful.
Right.
It would be
One of the other issues we discussed with Dr. Arlotto as well is the term lease in general is not even defined. So today, we lease copiers, we lease computers, we lease equipment and other items as well, big front-end loaders for us, our maintenance divisions. So if this was to pass, leases unspecified, all of a sudden the money that goes to our computer refresh program, to all the school copiers, all of those leases could be excluded as well. So there's, as it's currently drafted, there are some concerns that I believe county governments in Mako would have. There's probably some concerns that school districts, Pazam and Mabe would have as well. And, you know, it would probably behoove everybody to sort of have some time to dissect this and identify the flaws from all perspectives, Ms. Burge, and then see if there's a way to remedy them in some fashion.
And it's not only Anne Arundel County that's concerned about the impacts of this bill. I mean, this was another bill that was discussed last Thursday at the MABE meeting, and everyone is concerned about this bill. So, okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Webb.
Mr. Shaknovich, it looks to me like this doesn't take into account that if we did lease a building, we'd still have to staff it. And that money would have to come out of whatever maintenance of effort or wherever. They're not going to exclude that. For example, if we had stood up a high school, we leased a high school, you need staff of excess of 200 employees, I would suspect. So that's another cost that we would have to look at going forward in a situation like that.
Yes, sir. It's silent. It does not help support, it doesn't speak or help support the staffing, the utilities, et cetera, associated with running a building.
Thank you.
It sounds like we still have a lot of questions about the bill as it's written, not necessarily that we disagree with the concept as we're hearing about it, but as it's written, it's not defining lease, it's not addressing the operating money, and it's not really addressing the fact that I think we understand that you don't want to keep paying us this money as maintenance of effort after the lease is over, but we would like you to make sure you're paying it while the lease is in effect. We want to see the lease payment as a part of our MOE for that 20 or 30 years or whatever it is. Is this a bill that we could either defer a position on, or revise something so that it's clear that we're not just saying no, but we need some more information?
Sure, and I think time is important. This bill is being heard tomorrow afternoon, so it would be helpful to have a position today. So in light of Ms. Korbalak's suggestion and the input of the entire board, one thing that could be done is to support with amendments, and we could ask that they amend the bill to the format in which it last left the General Assembly at the end of last school year. At the end of last legislative session. So at the end of last legislative session, this was House Bill 349. It was actually retitled to say Education Study of Alternative Financing Methods for the Purpose of School Construction. So I think maybe the General Assembly, identifying some of the same issues that we saw, actually thought this is a good thing to take a look at, along with the many other issues, some of them which Mr. Sheknovich pointed out. And so you could maybe support with amendments to align with the 2014 version of this bill. That bill did pass the House and did not get through the Senate. So I think that might be a viable way to show that you're open to the conversation and are interested in some portions of this bill, but that there's still quite a bit of conversation and details that need to be worked out before supporting something like this.
Okay, so I know we have to deal with the motion that's on the table before we amend, but I've got some more questions, or board questions. Mr. Jackson.
I agree. I think there are some things that that have been mentioned that need to be addressed. In its current form, I'm going to abstain from the vote. If we decide that we will support with amendments, then I might go that route based off of what you just said of what they did last year, especially in alignment with what got through the House. And it just didn't have enough time before Sunday to get through the Senate piece. But that's my honest take on it. I don't like it necessarily like it's written, but I don't know that that we want to get into a political battle associated with this.
Mr. Webb.
Thank you. I wonder, has the county ever considered leasing the facility, having a lease in their name?
That is a tool that currently exists within law. They perfectly are
so the county could do it, and then they wouldn't have to worry about after 20 years it being in our budget.
Right. That already exists in law. That wouldn't require any of the proposed language you see before that would not be required at all. That tool currently exists within law.
So it sounds to me like we've already got all of the tools in place, and I don't see any need for this. That's my opinion.
Mrs. Birch.
I was just going to say, if we are going to move in the other direction, I would just ask that you pull from what was said here, that, we understand the concerns, but we also have our concerns about what would happen in the other way, and that's why we're suggesting the amendments instead of just saying what we think should happen.
Sure, and that can be reflected in the testimony, the written testimony that's submitted for the hearing tomorrow.
Thanks.
Mrs. Ritchie.
I heard Mr. Webb say something, and I want to just make sure I heard this correctly. So, if we came to an agreement with our funding authority that we wanted to build a school, they could take out the lease, but we didn't want to build the school. We wanted to put it in, the mall, the thing, or building. They could take out the lease, and then we would occupy the building for the purpose of the education. And then when the lease was completed, they can continue, doing that, or they can pull the school and we can move it someplace else or something like that. But so it exists now, what's proposed here, but instead of the money being shifted to us, they would just directly pay it, and they would be the holder of the lease.
Yes, ma'am. Just to elaborate, very simply, for any of our projects, for any of our CIP projects, we in no way, shape, or form dictate or even ask the county how are they going to fund it. So if they elect to fund it with bonds or PAYGO or impact fee monies or developer contributions or leases. So we say we need this building on this property, we need it in this year, this size, this timeline, etc. But the county government has many, many instruments to fund it, and it is not our role to tell the county how to fund it. We identify our needs, but how they go about the specific instrument that they use to fund it is entirely within their purview. It already exists in law, and we don't have a role to play in that part of the discussion.
All right, I don't have any more board questions about opposing the bill. Is there any public comment? So we have a motion on the floor to oppose this bill. All those in favor? I can't see Mr. Jackson not raising his hand. Okay, so it's 4-3. Are all those opposed to opposing the bill? So it's 4-2, or abstentions? 4-2-0. So the motion to oppose the bill does not pass. 4. Yep. Okay. Mrs. Nally.
I move to support the bill with amendments as outlined by our staff.
So just to clarify, we would be supporting the bill with amendments to further study the bill?
To reflect the 2014 version that passed the House, which would be a study of alternative financing methods for the purpose of school construction. And it specifically includes a study of the issue that the bill is currently written.
And that's what we would present tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay. Any board questions on that? Any public comment? All those in favor of supporting the bill with amendments? Or do we have a motion in a second? I've lost track. Okay. All those in favor of supporting the bill as amended, with amendments? Okay. That motion's passed 7-0-0.
Okay. Senate Bill 15, Task Force to Study the Implementation of Dyslexia Education Program. Essentially, this bill does exactly what the title says. It sets up a task force to look at dyslexia. This has already gotten a favorable report from the Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee. We support the we ask that you support the bill. I'm sorry, I'm talking too fast. We ask that you support the bill, and we will be mindful of any unfunded mandates that would come out of the task force. But there was one amendment to add a superintendent representative on that, and so we would ask that you support that as well. Second.
Mrs. Ritchie.
I just have a question, and again with these whole study things. Dyslexia has been around for quite a number of years. We've known about it. Is this really a necessary task force? I mean, don't we have programs in place that have to do with dyslexia? Don't we? I mean, I don't know. A lot of times when you bring some of these study things is to raise awareness and to find out solutions to new. I just don't know that, I don't understand the benefit of this. It's not that I don't support it. It's just, I don't support task force for stuff that we've been doing.
I think one of the issues that was raised at the hearing about this with dyslexia is it's not a recognized disability, and so it doesn't get some of the same raised protections and awareness that some other things. I'm sure we do already have programs in place, but it would just be looking at more effective ways to deliver those programs for students with dyslexia.
But even this wouldn't get it to be. I mean, that's federally. That has to be done federally, right? To be
right. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, if that's which makes perfect sense. But that's a federal thing. We don't just because we decide it's a issue and should be a recognized disability.
Well, I think that's what the task force would look at, whether it should or should not be a recognized disability, as well as other ways to effectively assist students that have dyslexia.
Mrs. Birch.
Again, this was another bill that had a great deal of discussion at last week's meeting. And when I first saw the title, I thought, well, that's just crazy. Of course we're all going to oppose this. And then I started to hear the conversation among other board members. And, it may be true that we're doing a good job here in Anne Arundel County, but it sounds like not everyone is doing a good job with dealing with dyslexia in their school districts. And so I think the fact that this is a statewide bill, and if you notice that it talks about, they'll develop a pilot program for an appropriately limited geographic area, I think that there's a target here. I don't know. I wasn't involved in coming up with the bill, but apparently there's some areas of the state that may need some help in coming up with a program and how to deal with dyslexia. That would just be my guess. Sometimes you have to read between the lines, but that would just be my guess. And perhaps, our folks can help those other folks if they're not doing a good job. And, if that's what it takes to help all the kids in the state, then that's what we should do. So.
Okay, I don't have any more board questions. Any public comment? All those in favor of supporting this bill? Opposed? Mr. Jackson's gone. Okay, so motion passes 5-1. Now you have the other two sections, if you have any questions.
Are just FYI for us? Yes. Section 2 is information only, and Section 3, the positions are already established by your 2015 legislative program. So if you have a question about a particular bill, I'm happy to address it, but I was not planning on going through each of those bills individually.
I don't see any questions. Any public comment? There's not much public left. Okay. Thank you so much. The next 3 items are review items. Item 5.01, the construction status report. And we don't have any presentation, but if there's any board questions. Any public comment? Or wait, we have Mrs. Ritchie.
I don't have a question, but just for the record, are we all on target with everything? Okay. I like to point that out because, there's other entities that seem not to be able to be on target. So we make good use of our money because we are on target and we're on time.
Any public comment? Okay. Item 5.02 is a review item, monthly financial status report in the FY 2015 revenue and expenditure projections. Are there any board questions or comments? No. Any public comment? Okay, item 5.03, award of contracts. This is also a review item. Any board questions or comments? Any public comment? All right. The last two items are consent items. Award of contracts 6.01 and 6.02. Do I have a motion to bundle these items and move them from information to action? Second. All those in favor? We now have an action item. Are there any board questions or comments? Or we need your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend the approval of contracts as listed on the agenda 6.01 and 6.02.
Now, are there any board questions? Any public comment? All those in favor? Motion passes 6-0-0. That concludes our public portion of our meeting. The next, I just have a couple of announcements. Our next Board of Education meeting would be February 18th, Wednesday. It's a day meeting at 10 a.m. The next Board Policy Committee meeting is next Wednesday, February 11th at 8:30 a.m. The next Board Budget Committee meeting is Tuesday, March 3rd at 5 p.m. in Conference Room 2. And we have a community outreach at Glen Burnie Library planned on February 24th from 6 to 8 p.m. Mrs. Nally.
I would like to make a motion to close the meeting, to go into closed session to discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom this public body has jurisdiction, or any other personnel matter that affects one or more specific individuals, and to conduct collective bargaining negotiations or consider matters that relate to the negotiations.
All those in favor? Motion passes 6-0-0. Our meeting is adjourned.